Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Parsha class, Parsha of Vayeira. We're the fourth Parsha of the Torah, starting from Genesis. Good morning, good to see you all. We started a little with a l'chaim on our coffee. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehakol nihiyah b'dvarei. Okay, so this week's Parsha, starting on page 94 in the Good Chumash, chapter 18, Parsha of Vayeira, we learn about Avraham Avinu. We started the story pretty much last week. Avraham going to Israel, the land that I will show you, the story of the famine, the story of the war of the 4 and 5 kings, the story of Ishmael's birth, the story of the bris. Obviously, God's promised to him that we will inherit the land of Israel. His children, his descendants will be many like the stars of the sky, the dust of the earth. And the story continues in this week's Parsha. Now, what I want to kind of focus on is the character of Abraham. Historians, if you read books, if you listen to a podcast of historians. So there are two types of historians. Some historians just tell you the fact. They tell you the story. This is what happened. This person lived. These are his dates. This is who he was. This is what he did. This is what he accomplished. This is where he lived. Right? We talk about the facts of history. But other historians, they give you like a commentary, like based on what he did. This is the type of person he was. Right? We draw for you a personality, a character, right? Now, these are not hard facts. These are conclusions that we come to based on what this person has done and accomplished in his life. This is my take on this person or this incident, right? So, Avraham Avinu, right? So the Torah tells us what he did. But who was he? What type of person was he? And what the Torah also tells us, not over here in the Parsha clearly, but Chassidus and Kabbalah teaches us that Avraham was the epitome of kindness, a kind person, a person caring for others, doing for others, thinking of others, being sensitive to others, giving, kindness, chesed. The first attribute of our 7 emotions is chesed, kindness. And this is who Avraham was. Yitzchak was a little different. Yaakov was different. Avraham was the epitome of kindness. And we see this time and again throughout his life. Already in last week's Parsha, where he stood up to the 4 kings to save Lot. And many, many other times we see being kind. So we see this in this Parsha as well. And I want to kind of focus on the beginning of the Parsha and then also in the middle of the Parsha. The beginning of the Parsha, we have the story where Avraham is recovering from his circumcision, right? He had a bris, but he wasn't an 8-day-old. He had a bris at the age of 99, right? That's an old age to have a bris. And so he was sick, he was in pain, he was resting, he was recovering. And he was sitting at the entranceway of his tent. Why was he sitting at the entranceway of his tent? Because Avraham couldn't handle, hey, this is time off, right? Take some time off and just rest. He couldn't do that. Again, he was such a kind person. He needed to host. He had to host. He had to find someone who needs a place to eat, to sleep, needs some help, right? I need to host people. So he was sitting outside by the entranceway. And as we'll read soon, how God came to visit him. And then he saw 3 Arabs who were travelers seemingly, and he invited them in. They ended up being angels. And they washed up. He went to prepare food for them. And these 3 people ended up being angels who each one came with a mission to tell, one came to heal, an angel of healing, to heal him from his bris. One of them came to notify them that the following year they will give birth to a child, to Isaac, the Yitzchak. And the other ones came to go to Sodom to rescue Lot from the wickedness of Sodom, where God eventually turned over and destroyed everyone in Sodom. Later in the Parsha, when Avram hears about what's happening in Sodom and Amorah, there were actually 5 towns on this, living in that neighborhood. And Avram starts to pray on their behalf. Avram can't handle this, even though he knows that they're wicked. He knows that they're deserving of punishment. But Avram, it doesn't sit well with him. So he starts to pray to Hashem and says, God, please, maybe there are 50 righteous people in Sodom. Maybe. And in the merit of these 50 righteous people, save the entire city or all the cities. And God says, I wish there were 50 people, but there aren't. We don't have 50 righteous people. And so they're so wicked. So Abraham says, well, maybe 40. Maybe we can find 40. And God says, I'm sorry, there isn't even 40. Maybe there are 30. Maybe there are 20. And the Torah talks about it. The Torah goes on, this whole dialogue. Abraham is dominating. Abraham is praying on behalf of these people who he doesn't know, and seemingly most people wouldn't care for. And he cares for them. And go down to 10. He says, maybe there are 10 righteous people. God says, no. Now, he didn't go below 10 because he knew that in the generation of the flood, there were less than 10 righteous people, and it didn't help, right? It didn't save the world. It only saved them themselves. So he realized that there isn't even 10, then God is going to go forward with his plan to destroy Sodom. So we're going to talk about the way Avram davened for the people of Sodom, and we're going to talk about the way he dealt with Hashem, with God, who was visiting him at the when he came for a visit, and he went and he left him and he went to see the guests, and we'll see what type of character, what type of person Avram was. So let's start reading inside from the beginning, chapter 18, the beginning of the Parsha. Vayeira elav Hashem be'eloi Mamre. God appeared to him, to Abraham. He was in the plains of Mamre. This is where he lived. This was 3 days after his circumcision, and very often the 3rd day after the circumcision is the most painful. And he is sitting at the entranceway of his tent while it was in the heat of the day. Now, what's the heat of the day? You can say the heat of the day is the afternoon, at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, it's the hottest, of the day. See, when I came to New Orleans, they told me over here, it's so hot that even at night, it's hot. Right? Like growing up in Toronto, we always knew, even if the hot summer day, the time it comes, nightfall, the sun is, 6, 7 p.m., especially in the middle of the night, it's cool. Right? Open the window, you go outside, take a walk, right? It's cool. Even though during the day it may be stuffy, it may be hot. But in New Orleans, I was told, you go at 2 a.m., it's just as hot as 2 p.m. It's the same thing. And it's true. Many, many days, it's very true. But in the plains of Mamre in Israel, there were hot. Similarly, there were certain time of the day it was hot. But truthfully, Rashi says that it's not just the heat of the day, as in like the hottest time of the day, but something occurred. Hashem did something that made this day even hotter than a usual hot day. And that is that he removed some type of cover, some type of layer to the sun. And it was 50 degrees, 100 degrees, however hot it was, hotter than usual. It was extremely, extremely hot, meaning it was uncharacteristically hot. So if the usual day, hot day will be in the 80s or the 90s, this was 120, whatever it was, right? It was 20, 30 degrees hotter than a regular day. And it was noticeable. And it was so noticeable that people weren't traveling. Even the people who were on they were on the trip already. They said, okay, I come out of the hotel this morning. I said, you know what? We're supposed to take a little trip today down the block. We're not doing it today. It's just too hot. People stayed home. So Avram is sitting at the entranceway of the entrance of his tent, and we know that his tent was pitched right at the side of the road because he did it purposefully in order to be able to to receive guests who are traveling, and he's outside and it's quiet. And God says, okay, this is all going according to plan. Great. We don't want guests today. We want Avram to rest. This is not a day for Avram has to be working hard and preparing food and hosting. So what's happening? Avram is sitting by the entranceway of his tent, and who appears to him? God. So God is visiting. Imagine that. You got a visitor. God is always with us, but here you got God's in his presence. Now, does it say what happened? Does it say the conversation that God had with him? So far, not. All we know is that God appeared to Abraham. By the way, it's already a lesson when you go to visit someone. See, many times you go to visit someone, it's a shiva home, or someone's sick, whatever. What do I say? What do I say? It's so uncomfortable. It's difficult. First thing is, you don't have to say anything. Just go there. Sit with the person. You may find conversation. So, something may come up and you'll have a nice conversation. But even if you don't, just be there. All right? When someone's sitting Shiva, for example, and later they think about, okay, who came to visit? They don't necessarily think about what was spoken during Shiva. We may not even remember what was spoken. But we remember this person came. This person flew in out of town and he sat with me for an hour. This person came by. What did we speak about? I don't remember. But the fact that the person was there, whether it's a sad moment like a Shiva or it's a happy moment, right? We came, visited at a happy occasion. The fact that the person is there together to celebrate, that's the main thing. So God came, he appeared to Abraham. Did they have a conversation? Perhaps. We don't know. But the main thing is that he was there. He was there to visit. Verse 2. So Abraham lifts his eyes and he sees. And behold, there are three men, that are standing upon him. They were standing in front of him. And he sees them. He runs towards them. On the opening of the tent. And he bows to them on the ground. And he says, Adonai, my master, if I only find favor in your eyes, do not pass, do not go away from your servants. Okay? Now, here's the question. How do we read this verse? When we say my master, or I see my lords, who is he referring to? Is he referring to these three people? Hey, please don't just walk away. Please come, do me a favor. Let me host you, right? I want, come into my tent. Or is he referring to, as we usually say, the word Adonai is referring to God. He's saying, God, please don't leave. Wait here for a minute. I have something more important. I have something more important than you, and that is these guests. Right? Which is interesting because when these guests come in, Avram tells them to wash their feet before they come in. Why do they wash their feet? Because there were many people at the time, idol worship was common. Many people who would bow to the dust, to the earth. So Avram did not want to bring that into his house. He said, first wash your feet. I don't want any idol worship in my house. In other words, Avram told God, hold a minute. I have something more important. These three idol worshipers are traveling. I need to bring them into my house. So he didn't differentiate between who he was hosting, right? A believer, a non-believer, no matter who they are, they need something to eat. Hold it, right? So there are two ways to read this, and they're both correct. One way to read it is he was talking directly to the guests. Please don't continue walking. Come in. Another reading is he told God, please hold it. Thank you for visiting, but I have something more important. The Talmud says that this teaches us something so powerful about hosting, about having guests. This teaches us that hachnasas orchim, hosting guests, is even more important than being present with God, with the God's Shekhinah. So if I have a choice of whatever that means in modern time, where I could spend time with God in study or something like that, and I say, you know what, I have either this or hosting guests. The hosting guest comes first. Because
it's a mitzvah, and that's why God.
It's a mitzvah.
That we're doing it.
It's a mitzvah, but it's a powerful message because seemingly being in the presence of God could also be like a mitzvah, right? But we learn from Abraham, we learn from Avraham that Avraham says, wait, God, thank you for visiting, but I have something even more important. But the question really is, the question is not on, the question is, how did Avraham know that?
Mhm.
How did see, we know that because Avram did that. So Avram is a pretty reliable source. Listen, Avram was able to do that. We can do it. How important is having guests? But how did Avram know that? Right? Imagine that. Imagine that. God Himself comes to visit. And if we had that experience where God is in our home and God is here, I mean, obviously God is always in our home, but whatever it was an extra presence of God. And you say, thank you for coming, but I have something a little more important, right? It's like you get you're having an important you're on a date with your spouse, right? You're on a date. Maybe you don't go on a date so often. Finally, you arranged. Okay, next week Tuesday night, we're blocking everything out. We're going on a date. This is time. This is just us time, right? The two of us going on a date, right? And then you're on the date. You're having a great time, and suddenly your spouse gets a phone call and say, "I'm sorry, I need to walk out for a few minutes." 20 minutes later. 20 minutes was gone. This is our date time. It's like, yeah, they called for they're doing a survey on the whatever, some Louisiana politics. So they wanted to know what my opinion on. Come on, I mean, is that more important? I mean, this is a date. This is the most important time right now, right? God is with Abraham. What's more important? How did Avraham know that there's something more important than being in the presence of God, right? That's the question. So we give two answers. One is, you can say, more of a philosophical answer, what went through Avram's head. But then there's another, more of an emotional answer. So the first answer you could give, something very simple. 2 + 2 is 4. It was a math equation. It was something very simple. Avram is sitting at the entrance of his tent. And it's a very, very hot day. It's a very hot day. Now, Avraham is no fool. Avraham knows why is it a very hot day. He knows that this was by design. He knows that God doesn't want him to have guests. So he made it a very hot day, right? So no guests are going to be walking. And then God Himself appears to him. Right? Okay, great. Now he sees guests. If being in God's presence was more important than guests, okay, you following me? If being in God's presence was more important than having guests, then why did God have to make it a very hot day? God could have just been there visiting Avram all day, and then Avram would know that he shouldn't have to deal with the guests. From the fact that God, in addition to visiting him, also made it a hot day, so guests, travelers shouldn't be out, Avram came to the conclusion that even when God is in my presence, I still have to have guests if they're out there, because otherwise God wouldn't have made it a very hot day. In other words, if being a hot day and God's presence, each on their own, is a reason why they should not have any guests, he doesn't have to do both. So from the fact that even during God's presence, he also made it a hot day to deter guests from traveling. So he came to the conclusion that if there was a traveler, it would be more important than being in God's presence. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Right? So that was something that he
could Hashem have designed, could he have thought that Hashem sent these guests? He was so clear about the heat to protect him, but then there's guests. Couldn't these be messengers from Hashem?
Well, they obviously turned out to be messengers from Hashem, but he's saying, did Avram himself understand that? Not necessarily, but that's a good point. perhaps he even knew that this was obviously by this time, but otherwise, yeah, I guess so. Like, that could be another equation that he made. But even without that, the equation was, well, like, if being in God's presence was enough to for him not to go after gas, so why did he have to make it a hot day? So the fact that he also made it a hot day, he understood that if there was any gas, he would have to go after them. So that was one explanation given. But the other explanation really talks about his character and his emotions, right? That he loves to have guests, and it's really about where it comes from, because many of us are kind people. I say many of us, but we say all of us are kind people. We all have a kind, some element to us. Some of us are more kind, some of us are less kind, but ultimately we're trained to think of others, to give to others, to be kind to others, right? That's the way that's what we're trained to do. But the truth is, kindness, not all kindness are made. Not all kindness are created equal. There are different types of motives to be kind to others. Naturally, when we are young children, we're born selfish. And that's the way it's supposed to be. We're supposed to be selfish, right? The only time it is totally not just acceptable, but almost, this is the way it should be, to wake up in the middle of the night and demand food and wake up the whole house because I am hungry. When is that justifiable? When you're 6 months old, when you're 2 months old, a few weeks old, maybe a year, right? You expect that a baby wakes up and they cry because they're hungry, and they wake the whole house up because I want food right now. You ever saw that meme? There's the two like twins, babies in a crib, and they're like whispering to each other, yeah, as soon as mommy falls asleep, that's when we're gonna start crying, right? Let's wait. As soon as she falls, that's when we have to cry for food, right? Don't do it too early, right? So, but that's what it is, right? Children, babies are meant to be selfish. I want something and I want you to give it to me, right? We don't expect toddlers at a younger age to share their toys. We have to teach them to share their toys, but naturally, this is mine. I want to play with it, and that's normal, right? We're born to be selfish. And in fact, even when we are taught to think about others, our formative years are supposed to be self-development, right? We go to school for what reason? That I should learn, I should study, I should be able to develop my own self, right? Now's not the time to go out there and change the world. Now's the time to get the tools to do that by being selfish, by studying, by building my own character, by finding who I am, right? This is the time, right? Imagine I told you, listen, take off from work. Don't do anything. Just spend a year studying. Well, students do that, right? But as adults, we know that now I could study part-time, but I also have to raise a family. I need a job. I need to be productive, right? But in our formative years, we are supposed to be selfish. Thinking about ourselves. That's normal. But as we grow older, we think more and more about others. Simultaneously, we think about ourselves, but we also think about others. But when we think about others, there's two ways of how this could come about. It could come from a selfish place. And the selfish place motive to think about others is that it makes me feel good, right? I feel like a better person when I give to others. And that's normal. Most of us, or many of us, have that feeling. I give when it feels good. I give because it feels good. I give when it helps me reach to, I feel like I'm becoming a better person because I'm giving to others. So it's a little, so my ego is very much involved in the midst of this kindness to others. But then there is kindness which comes from humility. Kindness which is not thinking about how I'm going to feel about it, but it's really about the other, only about the other. And what are the different ramifications of where the motive of giving comes from is really when it lessens me, when I have to give up something because I'm giving it to other and I really don't feel so good about it. That's the question. Am I going to be kind even when I'm going to lose out, seemingly? So if it's about, I'm feeling good, so I'm going to give when it feels good. But if it's really about thinking about the other, then even if it doesn't feel good for me, right, I'm losing out. Then I still give, right? So Avraham Avinu being in the presence of God, I'm sure it felt very good. He was having a great time. How many other people do we say that God appeared to them and he came to visit them? Avraham can think, wow, look, such a special person. I've done so much. I've spread the oneness of God, the monotheistic view. And obviously God is so happy with me. God himself came to visit me. That's great. Look at how much I've accomplished. And now I am enjoying the fruit of my labor. Kindness, that will come tomorrow. I'll continue my kindness, but right now, this is the climax. Like, this is what I'm waiting for. Finally, I'm getting my reward, and finally, I'm enjoying it. What does Abraham say? No. It's not about me. God, thank you. There are others. There are other people who need help. Am I gonna lose from it? Seemingly, I'm losing from it because I had such a great time with God. But there's something more important, because my kindness comes from a place of humility. And we see this in the verse later, when Abraham starts to pray on behalf of the people of Sodom. So if you turn a few pages in the Good Chumash, this is going to be on page 103. This, if you have a different Chumash, we're talking chapter 18. Chapter 18. We'll start from verse 26. It's kind of in the middle of the conversation, right? Avram here is davening, is praying on behalf of the people of Sodom, which we said, we knew that they were wicked people. In fact, even when Lot moved there last week's Parsha, the Torah says right away, these were bad, evil, sinful people. We all knew that. And the Torah talks about how evil they were and how insensitive they were to others. I mean, these were terrible people. Terrible people. Avram is davening for them. So he says, maybe there are 50 righteous people that could, in their merit, the entire region could be saved. Verse 26. Vayomer Hashem, if I will find in Sodom the 50 righteous people in the city, I will forgive the entire region for their sake. And obviously he says, but there isn't. We don't have 50. Verse 27. Vayan Avraham Vayomer. Avraham responded and said, Hine no ha'alti l'daber el Hashem. I will speak with God. And then he says a word like this: V'anoichi afar va'efer. I am dust and ashes. He refers to himself as afar va'efer. I am dust and ashes. And he continues on and saying, maybe there isn't 50, maybe there's 45, right? Then there's maybe 40, right? He goes down and he continues praying. What does this mean? I am dust and ashes. So Rashi gives one of interpretation, which they kind of put in the parentheses, that he says, if not, he's telling Hashem, if not for you, if not for your kindness to me, I would by now be dust and ashes. I would be dust is a reference to the war, the fight, the battle that Avram had with the 4 kings, last week's Parsha, in order to save Lot, who was taken captive, right? So there was a miraculous win, victory on Avram's side, but it didn't make any sense that Avram and his men should fight the 4 kings. I mean, these are 4 mighty empires, and he won the war. So if not for Hashem's help, I would have been dust. I would have been totally destroyed. Afer is ashes, and that's a reference to when Avram was younger. We know the story that he smashed his father's idols, and he was taken to Nimrod, who threw him into the furnace, into the fire, right? And then miraculously he was saved. This was the story of Avram's youth. So Avram's referencing that if not for your kindness to me, I would have been ashes. So Avram is like telling God, you saved me. I could have been dust, I could have been ashes, but I'm not because of you. And he continues to pray. That's one interpretation. Another interpretation, the Talmud says that Afar Vayeira is a reference to humility. What am I? What am I? I'm nothing. I'm like dust. People trample on me. I'm ashes. I'm like burnt piece of wood, right? I'm not worth anything. Avram was coming from a place of humility and praying from, it's not about me. I don't care about this. I'm just Afar Vayeira. I'm just dust and ashes. I'm praying on their behalf. I care for them. And the Talmud says something fascinating. The Talmud says that because Avraham mentioned these two words, Afar and Efer, dust and ashes, later his descendants received two special mitzvahs. Two of the 613 mitzvahs are directly related to this statement of Avraham, dust and ashes. We have two mitzvahs that uses dust and ashes. What's a mitzvah that uses dust? That's the mitzvah of Sota, right? Sota is a story, it's a mitzvah later in the Parsha of Naso in the book of Numbers. We talk about if a husband and wife are having some questions about each other's loyalty to each other, and perhaps the wife there's a concern that maybe she's cheating on the husband, so they have to go to the temple, and she drinks the water of the sota, and if she's truly if she's pure, which means it was only a concern, but she was never actually violated the marriage, then she gets blessings and they're able to live together happily ever after. Right, so part of the water of the sota that she drinks, you take some dust from the Mishkan or from the temple, and you put it into the water. And you put a verse, a few verses with God's name on it, a few verses from the Torah, and you put that parchment in the water itself, and the God erases his name, even though generally we're not allowed to erase God's name. God erases his name because God says, the peace between the husband and wife is more important than my name. So I'm willing to erase my name in order to bring peace to the home of a marriage. So that is one mitzvah that we have, that we use dust. The other mitzvah that we have is ashes, and that is referring to the ashes of the red heifer. That when someone becomes impure through coming into contact with a dead body, so in order for them to purify themselves and be able to bring an offering in the temple, part of the process of purification is to the Kohen takes some of the ashes of the red heifer, they sprinkle and put it in water, and they sprinkle it on the person. This is part of the purification process. During this process, the Kohen who actually does this service and sprinkles the blood, he himself becomes impure. So he becomes impure while purifying someone else. So this is another special mitzvah that we have in order to purify other people. But what's interesting is, the Rebbe points out that what the common denominator between these two special mitzvahs is that something gets lost in order to have this gain. And that is, God's name gets erased in order to bring peace to the home. A Kohen becomes impure in order to purify others. And that's exactly the idea over here. Avraham mentioning I am dust and ashes, it wasn't just about humility, but it was about his character. I'm not thinking about myself. I'm willing to lose. I'm willing to lose something just to think about another person. I don't gain anything from this. It's just about the other. That is who Avraham was. God says, I will erase my name to bring peace to the home. A Kohen says, I will become impure in order to purify others, right? It's not about, I feel better about doing good. It's about the good itself. Now, by the way, someone who feels good about doing something good, that's okay. Because ultimately, the main thing we want is to do good, right? The motives is only secondary. The most important thing is the kindness itself. It's like someone says, I don't feel good about giving charity. Well, who cares? What the recipient does feel good, right? The poor person who needs a piece of bread, they're going to live because you gave them a piece of bread, no matter the motive, whether you feel good about it, you feel bad about it, right? So at the end of the day, doing good, doing kindness is the most important thing. But the motive is secondary, but it's also important. For ourselves, it's important because, like I said, if we have a humble type of motive, then we will do good even when it doesn't feel good, even when we're losing out from it. And that is who Avraham was. That is who Avraham was. So we see this in the story of being in the presence of God, where he tells God, "Listen, God, something more important." Again, he was losing out. He was thinking about another, and the same is true when he was praying on behalf of the people of Sodom. He had nothing to gain from this. And on the contrary, I'm just dust and ashes. Not about me. I'm thinking about the other. There was a story that recently I heard someone actually made a song to this story. But the story goes back in sometime in, I guess, communist Russia era, where there was this, it was coming the time of Passover, time of Pesach. And what's on our head before Pesach? Obviously, we got to clean the house. We got to buy everything that we need. But matzah is a big deal because matzah is not something you can just go to any supermarket and buy some matzah or make it in your own home. Matzah has to be done properly to have kosher matzah. The kosher, the flour has to be prepared properly, and it's also simple to produce. So there was this Rebbe, Skoliner Rebbe. That was his name. I'm not sure what his actual name was. Who was able to secure a limited amount of kosher handmade matzah in Russia. And because there was a limited amount, he told his community that basically there's going to be rations, right? We're going to, it's going to be one per family, and then to certain other rabbis or leaders of their own congregations, he was able to give 3, not to have for your Seder plate, for your family, 3 matzahs, but not more than that. If you want to have for the whole Pesach, extra matzah to eat, munch on, no, there isn't enough for that, right? We're just going to do the minimum because the amount of matzah is so limited. Okay, so people are lining up, people are coming to get their matzah, and then there was the child of another Rebbe from Seret Vizhnus, another Rebbe that was living there somewhere. It was Russia, maybe it was somewhere in Europe, whatever it was. And he said, "I'm here on behalf of my father to receive his matzah." Okay, so he gives him 3 matzahs. This is for your father, for your family, 3 matzahs, especially for you. Then the son says, "My father really asked for another 3 matzahs. He wants 6." Skolin Rebbe is like, I really appreciate your father and I respect him dearly, but look, there's a line of people. Everyone's coming to get matzah. We don't have enough for everyone. Your father got 3. You want another 3? He's like, yeah, my father really, really wants another 3 matzahs. So he couldn't say no. So he gave him 6 matzahs instead of 3. But it was with a heavy heart because, why, you need so many other people don't have any. But he gave him the extra 3. Okay. It comes the night of the Seder. It's about an hour before nightfall. It's almost Pesach. It's almost Passover. There's a knock on the door in this rabbi's home, the Skoliner Rebbe, who is giving out the matzah. Who is it? It's the son. This is the same son of the other Rebbe who he gave 6 matzahs to. He's here. And he says, "It's almost Passover. Tell me, do you have any matzah for yourself?" And he says, "Tell you the truth, I actually don't, because last minute I saved for myself, but then someone came by last minute and didn't have any, and I gave them my own matzah. I actually have no matzah for myself." So he said, "Well, my father sent you 3 matzahs. My father knew that you were going to give out your last matzahs, so he saved 3 matzahs for you. Here's your matzahs for the Seder." So, right, there are some who are they think about others before they think about themselves, and that's who Avraham was. And that's what we can learn. That's what we can learn from Avraham. Not just kindness, but also the motive, where it comes from. It's about literally thinking about another person, not thinking about how I fit into the picture, how am I going to feel about it. Really thinking about others. That's my thought for today's Parsha. Thank you all for joining us, and we shall see you next week. I just wanted to mention that we're starting our Tanya for you, Tanya and you, a Tanya class on Thursday morning. If you'd like to join us, we had our first lesson, which was an intro to the Tanya. So we'll start chapter 1, hopefully this week on Thursday. It's a half-hour to 45-minute class. So you give a PM me for more information, as well as the following Tuesday, November 7th, is when we're starting our JLI, the World of Kabbalah. It's going to be in person and on Zoom. So you are more than welcome and encouraged to join us. So PM me for more information. That's going to be the following Tuesday, Kabbalah and you. So thank you for joining us this morning, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Rabbi.